Jennifer, welcome back to the Women Going Big podcast. This is wild. So we have been friends on Facebook for about 4 years. And it was 4 years ago in February that you were a guest on the very first rendition of what was the Women Going Big podcast at the time. Mm-hmm. And it has been a whirlwind, I think, for both of us after listening back to that podcast. A lot can happen in 4 years. So we're going to touch a little bit on that, but I want to jump right in currently with what you're doing. How are you going big in your life now, 4 years later?
I'm probably in very similar circumstances in some ways, in that I still own a coffee shop. I still have Brickhouse in Harrisonville. So that is still there. We made it through COVID, which happened just after I talked to you the last time, I think. I still have a full-time job, which I was not the same one that I was doing then, but I still do that. So managing a lot. I have added some things. I'm now on a couple of boards. I'm on a Love the Square board, Chamber of Commerce board, those kinds of things. And I have started a nonprofit. So, all of the things.
So 4 years ago, the theme of our conversation was timing, and how we talked a lot about like our entrepreneurial journey and just how we always had to be doing things and we were always adding things and stuff like that. But what has your entrepreneurial journey looked like in the last 4 years? Just like with the coffee shop and just everything you have going on.
So 4 years ago, I was basically a brand new entrepreneur in that I bought Brickhouse in October of 2019. So if I talked to you in February, that was 4 months into it. Not that I didn't know what I was doing then, but I've got 4 years under my belt now. So I'd probably have different tactics that I would go about how I did things back then. But the way that I've done it now is that we've made it through a lot of things. I keep referencing COVID just because that was like right after I bought Brickhouse. But that was a big event that myself and all business owners had to go through. The country, the world had to go through. It wasn't just me. So we did that. And then in late 2020, November of 2020, my husband passed away. So 2020 was a rough year if you add those two things in, but not that I would say that my husband passing is a blessing. I would not say that at all, obviously, but there have been a lot of really good things that I've been able to create out of that. So the nonprofit is actually in his name. It's the Fizer Foundation. We actually just did it a couple of weeks ago. We do a barbecue competition and we raise money for kids to go to trade school. So we do scholarships, and we're actually meeting here soon to be divvying out those scholarships. But I think we're at about $25,000 we've been raising each year. So it's me, some of his friends, and his mom and stepdad that do that organization. So that, I feel like from 4 years ago, it was just this like little thing that I was doing, even though it didn't seem little at the time, but it has exploded into all of these different facets of my life that I can attribute to Brickhouse and that beginning of my entrepreneurship journey and kind of laying the groundwork. I keep jokingly talking about selling Brickhouse, but I kind of feel like I'm getting to that point where I'm ready to go on to the next thing. And I don't know what that thing is yet exactly, but I'm getting that itch. I don't really necessarily have time to add something, so something has to go. And I feel like a coffee shop is something that everybody wants to do. The number of people that tell me that they want to own a coffee shop is astounding. So I almost feel like I've built this dream up and I can kind of pass it along to the next person to carry on. I'm getting to that point, but that was a long-winded answer to your question.
No, it's okay. I mean, it was essentially, can you summarize your last 4 years as an entrepreneur? So I didn't expect it to be short. So it's so funny that you mention, you jokingly like talk about selling the coffee shop and how you have that itch, right? And I think as entrepreneurs, that itch never goes away.
Oh, for sure.
No, it's like, sometimes it's like you put some cream on it and it's okay for a little while, but like it always comes back. I feel like it's so funny. You have so much going on, like with the nonprofit, and I think it just goes to show that if you're a true entrepreneur at heart, you could still be doing all of the things, and you will still have it. Like, you have had the successful coffee shop for 4 years. That should make anybody happy, and not that it doesn't. But you are already like you're itching for the next thing.
And I think a lot of it is that we've gotten to that point where like Brickhouse runs for the most part on its own. I have management there, I have staff. So it's gotten, and not that I can't be creative and be coming up with new things, but it's almost like gotten too easy. Like where it's like running, it's just flowing. And so it's like that new thing, like you need to be building something. And I could add to Brickhouse, I could add an additional location. I've considered adding roasting, like all these different little legs to it that I could. So I'm trying to decide if that will scratch that itch, if I do something like that, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
The one thing that I was listening back to in the other podcast was diving more into like the brick and mortar side of business ownership, because that is intimidating as crap. Like, as somebody that might be coming from a e-commerce or a service side of entrepreneurship, to even thinking about having a brick and mortar business and then management team that you have to run, that can look like super daunting and crazy to even think about. What would you say to somebody that is considering shifting their attention or even purchasing an existing business in a brick and mortar from a non-brick and mortar background?
Have a lot of saving. It takes a lot of money to run a brick and mortar because you cannot just be closed. It has to stay open regardless of whether you have customers coming in. Whatever your hours are, that's what your hours are. So you are either there or you're paying somebody else to be there. Not that there are not benefits. Obviously, there are some really great things that come out of having a brick and mortar. I feel like my social life is Brickhouse. Like, you meet customers, you build relationships with people that doesn't happen online necessarily in online businesses, not in the same way. At least you are having daily interactions with people in your community, and you are in my case, we're like fostering that sense of community. I think in general, coffee shops they just have that feeling like people want to go in there and hang out with their friends. And so that's just a big part of it. And so that benefit definitely outweighs that, like the cost of doing business in a lot of ways, but it is an expensive venture for sure. You've got rent, you've got payroll, utilities, all of those things that go into it that, an online business may not have.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And then the other thing I remembered I was going to ask you, one thing that I've really admired about watching your journey from afar is that you spend a lot of time with your management team. You will probably invest a lot in leadership. Can you talk a little bit about your philosophy on that, or just kind of how you approach leadership for your team at Brickhouse?
Absolutely. So this is one of those things where I do exactly like you said. I invest a lot in leadership. My manager, Roxy, she's been with me for years now, since the beginning, really. And, in a lot of ways, she is the one that's really running my business. So I could not do it without her. And in ways that I can expose her to new things or new people. We're in a small town, and even though we're close to Kansas City, we're in a small town, so you don't necessarily get that exposure just in Harrisonville. So I take her. My job is based out of New York. I will take her with me to New York when I go on work trips, and we will, go visit coffee shops and get her, exposure to new things. I've taken her to networking events and different leadership events where she can learn, and it's not always just me that's trying to be that mentor to her. I want big things for her as well. So I'm just always trying to invest in her and the rest of my team by proxy. I have a lot of younger staff. They're mostly, we'll say 16 to 22 is kind of the age range that we hire in. And in any way that I can support them, I always am looking for things that I can do. And whether that's bringing in a coach to teach them how to sell, or marketing, or personal finance, whatever it is whatever resources I can find for them and offer, I like to do, because I just view it as my duty to them. Like, I want them to have good lives, and I don't want that. I know that Brickhouse is not the career job for for everyone, but I want to do what I can to make an impact on every employee that I have.
I love that. And it's not an easy thing, and it doesn't come natural to a lot of people. So where do you think your drive to foster those relationships and to kind of like you're giving back essentially because you don't have to do any of those things, but where do you think that comes from for you? Like, did you learn that from somebody, or how did you decide to go in that direction with your team?
I have been blessed in that I've really worked with some amazing managers that took it upon themselves to mentor me in ways that I didn't even realize I was being mentored at the time. I always look at my job history, and the way that it happened made me feel like I was like, if I was going to continue in the job market, I'm like, I have no idea where this is going, because I was going from recruiting to finance to HR. There's all these steps that I took, and I'm like, I don't know what's happening here. This isn't leading me in a career path that's, for most normal people. But what it did do me was teach me a lot about how to run a business, because I learned all of these different aspects of things from really great people, honestly. And I was really blessed in that they went out of their way to teach me things that they didn't have to. And so when I bought a coffee shop and had all of these employees, all of a sudden, you're kind of hit with you have to train them. And so you're training them obviously on their job. But then you just start thinking oh, well, what else can I teach them? And I like being around that age group. They're fun. They have kind of a zest for life, and they're at the beginning of their life. And so they're they don't know what they want to do. So you're you can do anything. You're trying to instill that, really have a drive for doing whatever you want. It's possible right now. So that's just kind of always the approach that I've taken.
Let's backtrack. So tell me about what prompted, because I think the nonprofit is new. What did that journey look like? Because I have friends that start nonprofits, and it's not easy. That is not an easy thing to do by any means. So walk us through what that looked like for you.
Well, it's new. The nonprofit itself is new. The journey to get there is not. Mm-hmm. When my husband passed in November of 2020, the following spring, we did a memorial clay shoot. Just his friends, actually, at the time. I was not in any position to be trying to plan things at that point. But his friends had kind of gotten together and been like, we need to do something in memory of him. So we did a memorial clay shoot. We raised some money. That year, I think we raised maybe $10,000. So it was a good chunk of money, but it was nowhere near what we're doing now. And that was March of 2021. And kind of everybody thought that was really going to be the end of it. We didn't really have any plans to keep up with it. But then the following winter, the friends again, they got together and they were like, what do you think about a barbecue competition? And so knowing Jared, he loved to barbecue. He loved to smoke. He loved to do all of the things where you got to hang out with your friends all weekend, drink beer, and cook some food. That was his thing. So the barbecue competition was that perfect, just when somebody has an idea and it just meshes so well. And I was like, okay, that is what we're doing. So 2022 was the first barbecue competition that we did, maybe $15,000. So again, it was a good amount of money. And so that first year we gave away one $3,000 scholarship. The second year we gave away a $3,000 and a $1,500 scholarship. So then last year, 2023, we had the idea to do sponsors for the event. And so that was where it really kind of escalated so last year we raised about $25,000 or so. and we gave away $13,500 in scholarships to 5 different high school seniors. And then this year was year 3, like I said, so it was April 6th of this year. We just wrapped it up. So we are right around 25,000 again. And I think we're hoping to give away that same amount ish, somewhere between like $12,000 and $15,000 in scholarships. I know we have 11 that applied at the moment, so we'll see how many we can give away. But it's just such a fun thing. It's such a fun weekend. Like I said, Jared would have loved it. I mean, it was that was definitely his thing. So being able to get together with people and, you know, act like Jared was there, he would have enjoyed it, and be able to do something good from such a bad situation has been really the mission behind it. So we're going to keep doing it until we don't want to do it anymore, but that's, no time soon.
So the whole thing that's been going, that I've been thinking about while you were talking, is through your journey and through talking with you originally in 2020, is the journey of an entrepreneur is very up and down. You take paths that work, you take paths that don't work, you do things that don't work. And I think it all comes back to like that thing that drives us, right? Like that itch that we keep having to scratch. What are your thoughts, ideas on what would you say to somebody that maybe is hitting a wall, or, they tried something that didn't work? Because now, like, I would consider us both pretty seasoned entrepreneurs. I was also pretty young in my entrepreneurism when we talked before. What is some advice that you would give to baby entrepreneurs?
Keep going. Literally, that's all that it takes. When people ask me this question, because everybody wants to focus on like learning something new, or just kind of those things that like, oh, if I have this course, or if I have this coach, or if I learn this skill, whatever it is, that's going to be the thing that kind of pushes you over the edge. And not that those can't help, but honestly, it's just like having it in your mind that you're just not going to fail. Like, you just have to keep going, because that's just what you're going to do. Like, it's not an option to not do this anymore. Like, that doesn't ever enter my mind that it's not an option. So I will figure out anything. Like, if let's say I need to make rent this month, like, what are we going to do to make rent so that we can keep going? Like, that's just how it is. Like, there are going to be struggles. There's going to be walls that come up that it seems like they're insurmountable, but if you just keep doing, one step at a time, all of a sudden you're over that wall, and it's like, wow, what's the next thing? What's the next fun thing that's going to happen? Is my business about to explode? I just need to get through this thing. And so it does always seem, they seem like walls for sure. So I'm not saying that I've never had that feeling like, I just want to be done. I've had a few of those in the last week. Last Friday, I was like, oh my gosh, I hate this place. I hope it burns down. But not really. But the next day you wake up and it's like, okay, let's go do this. So just having that mindset that it's just, sometimes you have to embrace the suck for an afternoon or something, but next day you got to keep going.
Yeah, it's so funny that you said burn it down, because I literally was just talking to my husband and I said, what's so bad about being an entrepreneur? And he's not. He works for the city. He's a veteran, so he's already worked for the government. He loves his 9 to 5, and he's perfect for me, but he doesn't understand it either. And I was telling him, I'm like, honey, I just want to throw everything in the trash and light it on fire. But here's the thing, is I'm really tempted to sometimes, because I know that I can start over. Like, I know that I can make money somewhere else now. And like, that's the other part of being an entrepreneur, is that, again, like, I could literally scratch everything I'm doing and start over, and I know I would be fine. But it sucks at the same time.
Yes. And so I guess to go along with what I said and what you said, I am not trying to imply that you have to stick with something that is not working. Let's say the coffee shop was just failing and was like gonna run out, like I was just going to not be able to function going forward. Like, being able to evaluate whether this is working or not is a good skill to have, because you do have to be able to like evaluate whether you should stop doing something or not. But I feel like the thing with entrepreneurs, when you really do have that like deep-seated need to be doing your own thing, it's like, okay, well, this may not have worked out, but on to the next. Like, what's that next thing going to be? So, and I have a little bit of both because obviously, so I work a full-time job and I always have, like, I've basically always had a job while I've worked at owned Brickhouse, but it's even my jobs are very much small business minded. Like, I have a lot of say and influence on the business itself. And so, like, I would not be a good corporate person. Like, I have to be kind of my own boss. I have to be in charge of things. I have to not have people telling me what to do. So, even in my job, I am very much a like entrepreneurial mindset there.
It's really nice that you found that, because that is not like what I consider the norm. And I'm very much the same way. I had a job, like technically a job for I think about 4 years, but it was very much I was doing my own thing. I was in charge of my own, my own work. I had very little oversight. And I think in that way it can work for those of us that have this itch. But yeah, going back to like what you said about knowing when to stop something, I think a lot of times what happens with new entrepreneurs is they put all of their eggs in one basket. Not every one of your ideas is going to work. And it's a sucky thing to deal with.
You'd mentioned in the previous podcast that we did how I was like, I want to open a second location. Well, I did. I had a second location for all of 2022. And it was kind of one of those things where it just fell into my lap. It seemed like the perfect opportunity at the time. And luckily it was a fairly cheap purchase that was like somebody was selling a coffee shop, and I was like, okay, that's, it was manageable. It was close-ish. I had some employees that were former employees that were living in that town, and I was like, oh, this seems like everything seemed like it was lining up. And so it was 2022. We took over January 1st, 2022, and I let it go the entire year because I was kind of waiting to see. I'm like, all right, I need to see improvement. I need to be seeing things like at least trending in the right direction. And when we got close to the end of 2022, it didn't go how I'd hoped it would. And I learned a lot from that because first of all, the second location was a solid 45 minutes from the first one. And I was like, that is too far. You would think that having like some distance between them would actually be good because you're like, oh, you're expanding your region here. But no, it was too far for people to recognize the name. And it wasn't the same. It was a drive-through, whereas our original location is like a very cool downtown, like old brick building. So the feel, the vibe of the two different locations was totally different. The second one was in a college town. So there were all these factors that after I kind of really sat down and thought about it, I was like, I actually don't like the drive-through model. It loses all of the things that I love about the coffee shop that I own. It didn't have, and it was too far. And there was just all these things. And I'm like, I think it's time to cut the cord. So I ended up closing that one at the end of the year. And it's not that I wouldn't open a second one now, but I learned all of these things. I'm like so much more dialed in on what that actually means for me and what a second location has to look like in order for me to want to do it again. So I think, being able to know when to cut the cord on things, but also being able to like evaluate and say, okay, these are the things that I learned so that when I go forward, I don't make those mistakes again.
It's either going to work or it's not. And it's either going to be successful or you're going to learn what not to do. And I think the fear of it not being successful holds a lot of people back.
Yeah, you have to be able to like make calculated risks because you don't want to just like take every opportunity that's presented to you, because not everything that's presented as an opportunity is an actual opportunity. They may seem like it at first, but being able to really dive into the numbers and do kind of a gut check with yourself on whether that's something that you truly want to do is important, because you really need to have focus when you're owning a business. And anything that doesn't fit into that focus, you need to say no to.
That's such good advice. And speaking of advice, I'm really, really curious. So, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself from 4 years ago?
4 years ago, I wanted to own a business prior to buying Brickhouse, and so I did not go into owning a coffee shop because I wanted to own a coffee shop. I just wanted to own a business. And so I would probably take my own advice that I just gave and be much more calculated as far as what business. And it's not that I regret it at all, but I would have looked at like my personality and my schedule and all of those things and think, do I really want to open or have a place that's open 6 days a week, that's a brick and mortar that you have to go to, that like all of those things. And I was definitely especially, I was still an introvert, but I was definitely much more like sit at home all day. Like, I don't want to talk to people. I've grown out of that now. I feel like I have, introvert Jen and extrovert Jen. But I basically own a business that forces me to be an extrovert 24/7. That's just how it is. And so it's made me grow in a lot of ways, but I definitely probably would have spent more time thinking like, is this the business for me, or do I want to wait until something better comes along? Now, at that time though, I was kind of timid about business, like prior to having one. Like I wanted to own a business, but I was a little bit like, I don't know what I want to do. So how do I have a business when I don't know what I want to do? Like some people really want to own a restaurant. They love to cook or they love to do it. And so they have that drive because they want to own that particular business. And I was not that way. So I was just like, any business is fine. I just want to own something. And it's worked out. But now that I have the experience, I would definitely be more particular about what I did.
So that leads me to the question, if you had gone back and you had not opened a coffee shop, what business do you think would have better fit you? Like if you could pick anything and like go back, what would you do instead?
It's one of the things that I like about myself, but also not, like it's frustrating at times too, because I'm like, I have to own a business, but I don't know what business. So my thing that I really love doing is actually, I would consider it more of like not business flipping, but kind of like that. Like I love looking at a business that is already in existence and figuring out how I can make it better. And then I think moving on. I think that's what I've decided is really kind of intriguing to me. So people that like flip houses, kind of that thing, but for businesses. Like I spend a lot of time looking at other people's businesses and being like, this is what I would do if I was the owner. And I can't do any of those things, obviously, because I don't own it. But I think that is probably the direction that I plan to head into next. But like I said, I'll have a lot more experience behind me, and making sure that I pick one that I will enjoy. And like I said, I enjoy the coffee shop, so I'm not trying to imply that I don't, but making sure that if I choose another brick and mortar store or something similar, that it is something that I want to spend all of my time doing.
I'm just setting the stage right now. We're going to talk in another 4 years because the last time we talked, a lot of the things that we talked about happened. And I'm just banking on the fact that some of the things that we're talking about in today's episode, we're going to look back 4 years from now and we're going to be like, look at us go. You will have flipped several businesses. I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing. Who really knows? Maybe it's owning a business. But yeah, I'd love that for you. And I'm really looking forward to watching you in that because that's really intriguing. I follow a gal that she doesn't flip businesses, but she buys businesses like that. And she says like there's going to be a huge wave of essentially boomers that have businesses that have to get out of them because they have to retire. Think about the opportunity for people to buy businesses just like that from the owner and do exactly that. And whether they hang on to them or flip them, it's up to them.
It's so sad to me when I see a business that's been been in business for decades, and like the owner's like, oh, I want to retire, so we're closing up shop. And I'm like, oh, why didn't you sell it? I just saw one in our town yesterday, I think, and I was like, wow, I wonder why they didn't sell it instead of deciding to just close up. But you're exactly right. I think that we are probably on the cusp of a huge retirement, essentially, and businesses closing or being sold. So it could be exciting for anybody that wants to buy new businesses. I always think that buying an existing business is not a bad idea because you have all of that history, and to me, they're so much easier to figure out what to improve than trying to start from scratch.
So, to kind of wrap this conversation up, what are 3 things that you would tell somebody, another woman, that they should be doing? And I don't want to say should, but some things that you would recommend doing to make their life even bigger than what they're doing right now.
I mean, really, number one is just go for it. Like, don't feel like you have to wait until that next step, that next goal, that next whatever before you decide to go big. Like, just start doing it. And before you know it, you're like you just said, a lot of things that we talked about 4 years ago have already happened. You can't just wait until they have, like, everything's not going to fall into place for every single thing. So sometimes you just have to start. And it may not seem like going big at first, but it's a lot easier when you're already halfway there to be big than it is when you're just kind of staying in that same spot. Secondly, I would say that if you can find other people that are at least have similar goals to you, they don't have to be the same goals, obviously, but surround yourself with people that are doing bigger things, that are doing the things that you want to do, that are the kind of people that you want to be around. That is super important. I have always, for the last at least couple of years, had a really great support system. I have friends that I talk to about all of these things. And so we're constantly pushing each other. And so when you're talking to them, like, you don't want to be the one that's slacking. Like, you want to be keeping up with them. So like that is super important to me. And the third thing would be that you don't have to, like I said, so I have a job too, in addition to owning a business. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing kind of thing. Like, if you have bills that you need to pay, don't quit your job to go do this without, like, you can kind of slowly transition into something instead of feeling like, oh, I'm going to quit my job today and something's just going to happen, because that's potentially setting yourself up for failure. So sometimes that big leap is needed, but make sure that you have a net, I guess, before you make that jump.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you have thought about in this conversation that you want to touch on before we wrap up?
I am really looking forward to seeing what happens in the next 4 years. Now that we've had this conversation, I'm going to have to go back and listen to our episode before and see what all I was planning, what 4 years ago Jen thought was going to happen. But I think it's fun to be in that dreaming stage, to be thinking about what the future holds, and so never stop doing that either. Like, I feel like that's just, no matter what's happening now, it's going to change. So always be dreaming about what you want to happen next.
And it's funny, I think you actually said that in the last podcast. I think I had asked you what you see happening in the future, and I don't want to quote you exactly, but it was along the lines of whatever happens, like wherever, I don't want to put words to it, but whatever happens is going to be great. So yeah, definitely go back. I think I'm actually going to open this podcast with a clip from the old one. So it's going to be cool. This has been so much fun. I have enjoyed catching up with you. And I am also looking forward for us, what's going to happen in the next 4 years. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to the Women Going Big podcast. You can catch new episodes every Thursday. And before we wrap up, Jennifer, I totally forgot to ask this, but if listeners love this conversation as much as I did, where can they connect with you online?
So if you want to follow the coffee shop, it's Brickhouse Coffee Bar and Eatery, which I know is a really long name on Facebook and Instagram. But you can also just send me a friend request on Facebook if you like, or Instagram. Facebook is Jennifer Fizer, and it's Fizer. I don't have the P. I don't have all the money from the pharmaceutical company. So Jennifer Fizer, and I think on Instagram I'm Jen Fizer.
And those links will be in the show notes, so people don't need to worry about spelling them too much. But
awesome, even better.
All right. Well, thank you again so much, and thank you, listeners. And we will catch you next Thursday. Thanks, guys.